We got AmenRa in Washington, D.C. Now, is that like a satirical name in some way?
It is.
Okay. Are you a fan of AmenRa, or are you making fun of him?
Oh, no. I was calling myself AmenRa as a login name for years before I knew of,
before it was cool.
Videos.
Okay. What's up?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask a question to you guys. I've seen on some of your other shows that you've kind of dismissed the idea that Jesus was based off of the narratives of other pagan deities during the time.
Is this the Horus
the
thing?
rising and saving, the dying and saving gods, savior gods.
Yeah, I've heard that stuff, and I think some of it is extremely overblown. I mean, it's just, a lot of times people will go out of their way to construct patterns where they're not really as extensive as they sound. Yeah. It's just when you're looking for similarities between two things, if you really make the effort, you can find them, but that doesn't mean that one is based on the other necessarily.
There's also a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, which is that something comes after something else, that it's therefore somehow the result of it, and that's not correct. Things can independently evolve, especially ideas.
Right, but if the themes of these dying and rising gods were common amongst all these different Mediterranean cultures, why would it seem so implausible that the Jewish Palestinians would adopt it?
You have these same themes in North American Indian cultures. How did they get them? I mean, this is a common theme because people see this. Seasonal change is sufficient to give people the idea that things can die and be reborn.
Right, exactly. So if seasonal change is at the core of where these themes come from, why is it such an absurd position to say that Jesus was just another one of them?
It's not, but the problem comes in because there are a lot of people who want to say that Jesus is the result of these prior gods, and that needs to be demonstrated in a more robust way than just saying they existed beforehand in a similar region.
Right, exactly. I mean, people have similar patterns of thinking all over the world because they're people, and that's why when it comes to answering big unexplained questions like, where does the sun go? How does the sun go across the sky? One of my favorite examples, Ra riding across the sky in his barge. I mean, that's the kind of conclusion that they come to because they're familiar with people doing things and making boats. Yeah. And so they're like, well, maybe there was a really big guy with a really big boat.
Or Apollo driving his chariot.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. Now, I'm not saying that cultural assimilation can't exist between some of these ideas. I mean, clearly the Greeks did have a tradition of, going into Hades and coming back. Like a lot of their heroes did that, and there was a lot of Greek influence in the Roman world at the same time that Jesus would have been running around if he was living. But I think people have to take a little care because a lot of people play fast and loose with these concepts of the prior. There is some not too good scholarship out there about this, and that's interesting. One of the people on our back cruise that's speaking is Richard Carrier, and he actually is a bit of I don't know whether it's fair to call him a proponent of the mythicist view or just that he is a little bit skeptical of the historicity view. He might have gotten more stronger in mythicism lately, but he often talks about what is good scholarship to use in regard to this versus what is crap scholarship to not use, and there's a lot of crap. So
a whole lot. I'm not talking about what is it, Ashira Ra, whatever her name is.
Acharya.
Oh yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, not her.
We had somebody angry write to us one time about using Horus. They had used Horus and someone called them out. And so when they went to look it up, they couldn't find anything to really validate it in a robust way. And they felt really stupid and they wrote and they were angry at us. And I was like, well, but we weren't saying that. I mean, I don't know where you heard it, but you heard it on a different video and now you're coming to us to complain. And, I'm not responsible for you listening to somebody who said something and then not checking it out and then presenting it as an argument to your theist dad.
But what about, didn't the early Christians use the pagan statues of Isis and Horus to worship Mary and Jesus?
I couldn't tell you.
I'm not aware of that.
Tell you.
I mean, Yeah, I'm not familiar with that story.
But even if you had let's say you had a cult, a particular Christian cult that did that, there were lots of different Christian groups even at that time. So,
Right.
I mean, you could have had all kinds of things going on. They were having all of the epistles in the New Testament have to do with arguments and debates that are happening within the churches and between the apostles. So they were having doctrinal disagreements even then about what was correct and what wasn't correct.
Yeah, and of course, bear in mind that once you're talking about early Christians, which is several decades after Jesus died, when you're talking about having any semblance of a Christian church, you're already way past the question of where the Jesus myth came from originally, or whether it was a myth or whether he was a real person who the details of his life were mythicized, which I am totally with. I mean, Jesus may have existed, but it's incredibly unlikely that he did the walking on water and loaves into fishes and rising from the dead kind of thing.
Right.
Which is why I tend to think that questions about whether Jesus was a real person are vaguely interesting, but kind of beside the point. But maybe Richard Carrier would disagree with me.
Right. I'm probably with Richard Carrier as well. I think there may have been a historical person, but his much of the story that we know as the Jesus narrative was abstracted from common myths around that
Okay.
But do you feel that you don't feel that the whole mythicist movement or the information that's out there has the same level of credibility as the ancient Hebrews using the other pagan myths around them to build their
My understanding of it is that it's not something that mainstream historians take seriously, and I think maybe I actually feel like I should check in with Richard Carrier when he drops by next month. But I think maybe he would agree that even though he's a strong proponent of this, it's not accepted by a lot of historians.
I'll just mention that his latest book, which is what he's going to be talking about when he comes to the Bat Cruise, is actually going to be peer reviewed.
Have you read it?
No, I have not, but it just came out, and but it is for academic peer review. So he's trying to get this pushed through the proper channels for academic credibility, as opposed to just throwing it out to the popular opinion.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. I just have one other thing I want to talk about.
Sure.
Recently, I went to my mother's church, and I hadn't been to church in several years, and I found the experience very disturbing.
I'm sorry to hear
it. It changes when you've been away. I agree.
Yes, because I couldn't believe how cultish it was in the way the way they spoke back to the same words. They spoke back, and it was almost like a chant.
Is this
and
Catholic?
Is this no? This was Methodist.
It wasn't liturgy. Oh, okay. All right, Methodist. You said.
And then when they collected, the money or whatever, they held it up to the altar and. And they all chanted together, and it was very strange.
Yeah, I always kind of feel like the difference between a religion and a cult is like 1 million followers.
Right. The pastor, they have a new pastor. He's actually from the Harvard Divinity School, so they're very proud of him. And he told a story about how there are two types of people. There are sheep, and there are goats.
Oh, yeah.
And human beings are...
And the sheep are the good ones in this analogy, right?
Goats are evil people.
So he kept saying that over and over, that sheep, they need a shepherd, and if you obey your shepherd, you will be taken care of, whereas a goat is hard-headed, he doesn't want to listen, he wants to question everything. Yeah. And when he started describing all these things, all these attributes of the goat, I looked over to my mother and I just went, bah! Just to let her know.
How'd she take that?
She pretty much knows where I stand on the God question. So I just wanted to say that you guys are doing a great job, and I love your show.
Well, thanks for calling.
Oh, no problem. Have a good day.
You too.
All right. Talk to you later.